In the 12th year of Ahaz king of Judah, Hoshea the son of Elah became king over Israel in Samaria, and reigned for 9 years. He did evil in the sight of the Lord, but not as the kings of Israel who came before him. Shalmaneser the fifth, king of Assyria, came up against him, and Hoshea became his servant, and paid him tribute money. But the king of Assyria discovered a conspiracy in Hoshea, who sent messengers to So, king of Egypt, and offered no tribute to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria arrested him, and bound him in prison. Then the king of Assyria invaded all the land of Israel, and went up to Samaria, and besieged it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria, and carried the people of Israel into exile to Assyria, and settled them in Hala and in Habor, by the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. Now this came about because the Israelites had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up from the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh king of Egypt, and they had feared, and worshipped other gods, and walked in the customs of the pagan nations, whom the Lord had driven out before the sons descendants of Israel, and in the pagan customs of the kings of Israel, which they had introduced. The Israelites ascribed things to the Lord their God which were not true. They built for themselves high places of worship in all their towns, from the lonely lookout tower to the populous fortified city. They set up for themselves sacred pillars, memorial stones, and Asherim on every high hill and under every green tree. There they burned incense on all the high places, just as the pagan nations, whom the Lord had deported before them. And they did evil and contemptible things, provoking the Lord to anger. And they served idols, of which the Lord had said to them, "You shall not do this thing." Yet the Lord warned Israel and Judah through all his prophets and every seer, saying, "Turn from your evil ways, and keep my commandments and my statutes, in accordance with all the law which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you by my servants the prophets." However, they did not listen, but stiffened their necks as did their fathers, who did not believe, trust in, rely on, remain steadfast to the Lord their God. They rejected his statutes and his covenant, which he made with their fathers, as well as his warnings that he gave them. And they followed vanity, that is, false gods, idols, and became vain, empty-headed. They followed the pagan practices of the nations which surrounded them, although the Lord had commanded that they were not to do as they did. They abandoned all the commandments of the Lord their God, and made for themselves cast images of 2 calves, and they made an Asherah idol, and worshipped all the starry host of heaven, and served Baal. They made their sons and their daughters pass through the fire as human sacrifices, and used divination to foretell the future, and enchantments, and they sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. Therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel, and removed them from his sight. None of the tribes was left except the tribe of Judah. Judah did not keep the commandments of the Lord their God either, but walked in the customs which Israel introduced. So the Lord rejected all the descendants of Israel, Jacob, and repeatedly afflicted them, and handed them over to plunderers, until he had cast them out of his sight. When he had torn Israel from the royal house of David, they made Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, king. And Jeroboam drove Israel away from following the Lord, and made them commit a great sin. For the Israelites walked in all the idolatrous sins which Jeroboam committed. They did not turn from them, until the Lord removed Israel from his sight, just as he had foretold through all his servants, the prophets. So Israel went into exile from their own land to Assyria to this day, the date of this writing. The king of Assyria brought men from Babylon, and from Cutha, and from Ava, and from Hamath, and Sepharvaim, and settled them in the cities of Samaria, in place of the sons, people of Israel. They took possession of Samaria, and lived in its cities. Now when they began to live there, they did not fear the Lord. Therefore the Lord sent lions among them, which killed some of them. So the king of Assyria was told, "The nations whom you have sent into exile, and settled in the cities of Samaria, do not know the custom of the God of the land. So he has sent lions among them, and they are killing them, because they do not know the manner of worship demanded by the God of the land." Then the king of Assyria commanded, "Take back to Samaria one of the priests, whom you brought from there, and have him go and live there, and have him teach the people the custom of the God of the land." So one of the priests, whom they had exiled from Samaria, came back and lived in Bethel, and taught them how they should fear and worship the Lord. But every nation still made gods of its own, and put them in the houses, shrines of the high places, which the Samaritans had made, every nation in the cities where they lived. The men of Babylon made Succoth-Benoth, The men of Cuth made Nergal. The men of Hamath made Ashima. The Avites made Nibhaz and Tartak. And the Sepharvites burned their children in the fire to Adramelech and Anamelech, the gods of Sepharvaim. They also feared the Lord, and appointed from among themselves priests of the high places, who sacrificed for them in the houses of the high places. They feared the Lord, yet served their own gods, following the custom of the nations, from among whom they had been sent into exile. To this day, they act in accordance with their former pagan customs. They do not really fear the Lord, nor do they obey their statutes and ordinances, nor the law, nor the commandments which the Lord commanded the sons, descendants of Jacob, whom he named Israel, with whom the Lord had made a covenant, and commanded them, saying, You shall not fear other gods, or bow yourselves to them, nor serve them, nor sacrifice to them. But the Lord, who brought you up from the land of Egypt with great power and an outstretched arm, him you shall fear, and to him you shall bow yourselves down, and to him you shall sacrifice. The statutes and the ordinances, and the law, and the commandment, which he wrote for you by the hand of Moses, you shall observe and do forever. You shall not fear, worship, serve other gods. The covenant that I have made with you, you shall not forget. You shall not fear other gods. But the Lord your God you shall fear and worship. Then he will rescue you from the hands of all your enemies. However, they did not listen, but they acted in accordance with their former custom. So these nations superficially feared the Lord. They also served their idols, as did their children and their children's children, just as their fathers did. So do they to this day, the date of this writing.